Hi everyone, I'm Rachel from The Analytical Mommy, and this video is well overdue. I've been getting lots of requests for this, so here we are. I'm going to be sharing with you how to use the trace function in the Glowforge Aura. Now, this is pretty much the same for the Glowforge Plus and the Glowforge Pro if you have that machine as well. It's really a very similar process because most of what's happening is going to be within the Glowforge app, which is the same across all the different machines. So I've got a picture here that my son drew, and I'm going to have the Glowforge Aura scan this picture and create essentially an SVG out of it. It's not truly an SVG. It's really more like a PNG or a JPEG. Whatever it's scanning, it's going to turn into an engravable image. So you're not going to be able to cut anything that you're tracing with the Glowforge, but you will be able to engrave it on just about anything. Now, the other thing that I do want to point out before we move forward is that the trace function is really intended for 2D objects, something like a piece of paper with a drawing on it, or, like your grandmother's recipe, that sort of thing. You're not going to be able to put a 3D item in the Glowforge and have it trace that so that you can make, let's say, like a jig. That question's come up a lot. You won't be able to use the trace function for a jig. So if you wanted to, for example, trace a 3D object to cut it, you'll have to use a different process. This is really for creating something that you're going to be able to engrave. So I've already talked about like a drawing or a recipe from a loved one. Another thing you can do with this is a photo. So if you've got, and this relates to another tutorial I'll have coming soon, but if you've got a photo from whatever it might be, and you want to turn it into, let's say, a puzzle, you can use the trace function to scan the photo, get it into Glowforge, and then engrave it on something, and then, let's say, turn it into a puzzle. So there is a lot you can do with the trace function. I just want to make sure up front, save everybody a lot of like headache, and point out that it's really meant for things that are like a piece of paper or photo, not a 3D item, and you won't be able to cut what you're tracing. It's for engraving. So let's get started. I'm going to take the photo or the drawing that my son made, and I'm going to put it in the Glowforge Aura, and we're going to have it traced. So the first thing to do is going to be to open your Glowforge and place your drawing or whatever it is you want it to trace facing up towards the camera. I highly recommend putting it as close towards the center as possible, because that's where the camera is. So you want to get it like right under the camera to ensure that you're not getting a distorted picture of any sort. So let me do that. All right, so I've put it in my Glowforge Aura. It's right below the camera, and as you can see on my screen, it is starting to scan, and you can now see the drawing that he made, and it's in there. So what we're going to do next is click on the plus side towards the plus sign in the top middle, and then you're going to click on Trace. Now, I like to just give it a minute, and then you'll see your drawing pop up. And what you're going to want to do, you see this little plus sign. You're going to click on one corner of your object, whatever you have it tracing, and you're going to drag that all the way to the other end so that you can gather as much of that as possible. And then when you let go, you can see we've got our trace item. Now, I don't love how that looks because you can see I've got a line around the edges. So let's try to redo that. I'm going to click on back, and then it's going to give me an option to redo it. So I'm not going to go all the way to the edge because I'd like to get a nice clean cut. Whatever it traces, it's going to engrave, and I didn't want it to engrave those lines. So let's redo that. Now, I think this looks a lot better. All right, now from here, you have a couple options. You can just continue forward if this is how it looks and how you want it. You can go from here and just click on confirm. If you do want to change anything, you can see it says up here, step 2, optional. Click the white areas that you want to cut away. Use Control Z or the undo option if you make any mistakes. Well, let's say, for example, you can see there's some little dots and stuff along the side. So I can start removing things now. I clicked over there. It's going to remove all of these pieces right here if I keep clicking. And so we can basically select different items that we might want to get rid of. And it's fairly easy to do. You're just going to basically click on and around the item that you want to get rid of. While I really, really love the trace function and that I can do that natively within the Glowforge app, I do recommend using the trace function just for images that you like essentially as is. For something like a photo, it's truly amazing. It gets really great detail, and there's really very little you need to do to it. So let's go back. We're going to trace this again. All right, so now we've got our item, and we're just going to click over here, and now it's going to pull it into our dashboard. And you're going to see in a moment that we've got the scan. I'm pulling it off to the side. So this is what it traced, and it looks exactly like the drawing. It's perfect. So what I'm going to do now that we've got our image, I'm going to remove this from the Glowforge Aura and put in a piece of wood that I want to engrave this drawing onto. All right, so I've removed the paper and put in a piece of proof grade. I believe it's maple. Nope, I apologize. I put in a light basswood plywood, and so that's what you see here, the square. Let me just delete this. I think that's left over. And now I'm going to pull over my image, and I can rotate and resize and do whatever I might need to do to the image. So let's get that rotated and resize it a little. It's a little bit too big. I'll just take a moment to show you a little trick. I've got another video on this, but since we're here, I'm going to show you my favorite way to line up an image or an SVG, whatever it might be, onto a blank or your material. So to do this, you will need to have Glowforge Premium, but you also need to have that in order to do trace. So I'm going to assume you've got that. We're going to come up here to the top and click on the shapes icon. And then since our shape, our wood is roughly a rectangle, I'm going to choose the square. Then we'll need to come down to this little like measuring the ruler button, and you'll want to unselect the lock function. So we want to be able to move this around and not be stuck in a square. All right, so let's now overlay this with our material. And what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to try to make the square here roughly the size of my material. So it'll be a good approximation of what I want to engrave on. All right, so this is pretty close. So you can see I've basically circled the material. And now I've got a square that represents my material. I've got my engraving. And what I can do now is I can center these two objects. So I'm going to select both. You can do that the way I did just now, or you can do Control A. And then we're going to come over here on the bottom left to the aligning tool. And let me move my face out of the way for a second. We'll come to the aligning tool, and we're going to basically select the middle options. And so now what I've done is I've centered what I traced, centered it on the rectangle, and we can just make sure now that both of those are aligned with my material. Now, when you're doing this, the main thing you want to make sure is that when you're done, you delete that rectangle. So let's pull it off to the side and delete that because we don't want to work with that. All right, so we've got our traced image. It's centered on our blank. And now I just need to select the material. So like I said, I'm using light basswood. And so I'm just going to put that into the material here. I do like to still do set focus. It's just a habit I've gotten into. So it looks like my machine has gone offline. Let me wake it back up. Even though this is one video for you guys, I had to do this in 2 steps and pick up my kid in the middle. So my machine has gone to sleep. So let's wake it back up, and then I'm going to set focus as soon as it comes back. And I may need to readjust the image actually, since it's, no, it looks like it didn't jump. We're good. All right. So click on these three dots and do set focus. So as I was saying, even though with proof grade material, it sets the depth and all that, I do find that I get better results if I do set focus, no matter what the material is, whether it's proof grade or not. I always do set focus. So that's setting focus for me right now. And because we've put in proof grade, it is going to set the engrave function for me, which is really nice. But just in case you wanted to modify it, it's by default choosing the draft photo. We could switch it to standard def. I think that's what SD stands for, or high def. I'm going to leave it on draft. For something like this, I'm not going to see a massive difference. So I'm just going to leave it on draft. If you were not using proof grade material, you would want to come down here to manual, click on that and enter your settings. If you don't know how to do that, that's for another video. But for now, we're just going to leave it on the standard proof grade settings. So just to recap before I print, we did the trace functions. We clicked on plus, we traced it, we imported it, we aligned it, did set focus, check the engrave settings, and now we're ready to print. So let's just click on print, and it's going to send that over to my machine. As soon as I see essentially the duration of the print pop up over here, I know I'm ready to go. Click on the button on my Glowforge Aura, and it'll do the rest for me. So stand by. I will show you what it looks like when it's done, and I'll show you side by side the picture and the engraving. It's going to be amazing. So this is just how easy the trace function really is. Let's get that going, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. All right, so the engraving is done. Now just to show you before I open it, this was the original drawing that my son made, and this is our engraving. Let me show you them side by side. Hopefully you can see that well. I think the scan turned out perfectly. The engraving is beautiful. I'm about to take the masking off in just a second. But you can see all of the little details, and everything came through in the engraving, came through in the tracing. It did a really, really good job. So there you have it. Now you know how to use the trace function in the Glowforge Aura app. It works great for scanning and engraving anything that's 2D. If you need to do some major edits to an image, comment below and I'll share a tutorial on how to scan and make edits and then import it into the Glowforge app. But for minor edits, like I showed, you can do that in the Glowforge app as well. I hope you found this useful. Feel free to comment below if you have any questions and follow for more. See you on the next one.